In today's hip-hop, many artists have opened themselves up to becoming more vulnerable and having songs that center around mental health, addiction, and suicide. To better understand what the effects of talking about such sensitive topics, we will delve into the prominent figures in hip-hop who have championed the talk on mental health and how that has changed the scope of hip-hop today. Let's start with Joe Budden, one of the first to champion mental health conversations while actively rapping about his depression, talking openly about his suicidal thoughts and his addiction. Every week, the topic of mental health comes up regularly on the Joe Budden podcast. Joe highlights how as men in hip-hop do not really open up or seek help from their peers when they are in need of help, and is actively trying to get people to start conversations. Even a simple "how are you today?" or "have you eaten today?" could really help someone take the first steps to seek help. On a song, Only Human, Joe raps.
Trying to weather the storm. I thought that black cloud was gone. It's been beside me all along, not the song.
This song came out a day after he was released from jail and details almost attempting suicide due to the mother of his child who was keeping him from his son. Joe says it's one of his top 10 songs and it was the most difficult to write creatively and emotionally. Mac Miller, one of my favorite artists. His career's been colored with talk or lyrics about drug abuse, depression and death. Unfortunately, Mac recently passed away due to an accidental overdose of a combination of drugs and alcohol. Mac found an outlet for emotional expression through his music. He explicitly called it great therapy for depression in his Billboard interview of 2015. Mac also pointed out that fame and success doesn't solve problems.
I think it started
with success.
Yeah.
How do you explain that to yourself? You're struggling, you're not depressed.
Right.
You're successful, you're depressed.
You know, it's funny because you talk to people and they say, you know, what do you have to be depressed about? You have money and da-da-da-da. Fame is tricky because you read what's said about you, then you know what you know to be true, and the lines start to blur.
On Mac's biggest hit, Weekend, featuring Miguel, he raps.
In God's eye, make water, wine, pause, and time is coming, they often hate me. Never will I walk in line, I cross the T's and dot the I's. Wondering how I got this high. Fell asleep and forgot to die, goddamn. I'm popping them downers and drinking them pounders. Faded.
XXXTentacion was a part of a new wave of artists, sometimes referred to as SoundCloud rap, whose music embodied a disconnect with societal norms and embraced internet culture and heavy Xanax use. The role of Xanax, an addictive and potent pharmaceutical used to treat anxiety to help soothe or numb pain, and created a floating disconnect from reality. On his first two albums, 17 and Question Mark, which debuted at number 2 and number 1 respectively on the Billboard 200, XXX explicitly talks about the loneliness, depression, and the urge to end his own life. On the song Jocelyn Flores, X raps about tragic suicide of his close friend.
Ain't put you this in, bag of a phone call. Girl that you fuck with, kill herself. That was this summer and nobody helped. And ever since then, when I hate myself, when the fucking ended.
X's music spoke to young people who share similar struggles with mental health. That, coupled with his almost sermon-like post to Instagram Live, in which he directed reassuring messages to people suffering, placed him at the forefront of a movement of young rappers who became musical extensions of a national opioid and suicide crisis, one that transcends the genre as well as racial and social lines. I believe with prominent figures in hip-hop bringing awareness to mental health and other struggles has opened up hip-hop to becoming more about yourself. Frank Ocean's beautifully and elegantly written letter about loving a man was released in 2013. It was the talking point of that year and was a very powerful moment when he performed Forrest Gump at the Grammys. Hip-hop isn't as accepting towards the LGBTQ+ community as other genres of music, but it is slowly becoming more welcoming in the same light as mental health becoming an increasing conversation in hip-hop. Frank has been seen wearing makeup on his artist headshots. We've had artists like Lil Peep, who also passed away this year, and his boyfriend I Love McConan being an openly gay couple in hip-hop. We've seen artists like Young Thug, who's defying gender stereotypes by wearing a dress on his album cover and openly stating 90% of his clothes are women's.